You think your thoughts are yours, that they rise like smoke from the fire of consciousness, spontaneous, fluid, self-evident, but they are echoes. They are echoes of an older war, one you forgot you were drafted into, a war between what you feel and what you're allowed to feel, between the truth and the version of the truth you've learned to endure. We do not think freely. We think within walls. Walls built by memory, by trauma, by silence. The mind does not forget the pain it cannot face. It buries it, disguises it, turns it into neurosis, into chronic worry, into the strange satisfaction of being stuck, and then calls it normal. You want to change your life, but the life you live is the result of compromises you made with suffering you couldn't name. You carry your father's silence in the way you apologize for taking up space. You echo your mother's fear in the way you abandon yourself before anyone else can. These are not just patterns. They are symptoms of repression. The truth is, we repress not because we're weak, but because once, long ago, knowing the truth would have destroyed us. And so, the unconscious took over. Like a body curling around a wound, the psyche folds itself to protect the unbearable. But what is hidden does not disappear. It returns in disguise. You find it in your addictions, your distractions, your chronic dissatisfaction. You find it in the partners you choose and the ones you push away, in the rage that erupts too easily and the tears that never come. These are not random. They are messages, not from above, but from below, from the subterranean layers of your own mind, where truth lives exiled. You do not suffer because you are broken. You suffer because something within you remembers, and something else within you cannot let it surface. The ego was built to mediate that tension, to keep the peace between desire and guilt, pleasure and prohibition, need and shame. But the ego is not a truth seeker. It is a survivalist. It learns to forget what cannot be integrated. It invents rationalizations for emotions that terrify it. It projects its darkest impulses onto others. It invents morality to avoid desire and fantasy to avoid pain. And then it calls this reality. Do you think you're in control? That your choices are freely made? That your personality is yours? Then tell me, why do you sabotage what you want most? Why do you fear success as much as failure? Why do you seek love and flee intimacy? The answer is not in your behavior. The answer is in what that behavior protects you from. Inside every compulsion is a conflict. Inside every conflict, a history. And inside that history, a wound. There is a part of you that knows, that sees, that remembers, but it is buried beneath layers of forgetting. This is not accidental. It is structural. The unconscious is not a place you visit. It is the place you live without knowing. Transformation does not begin with affirmations. It begins with confrontation, with the terrifying intimacy of seeing yourself without the mask, without the justification, without the sedative of self-help slogans. True change is not comfortable. It is a revolt against the entire internal system built to avoid pain. It is the return of the repressed. You think healing is a straight line, a staircase into the light, but it is more like a spiral into the dark. The descent is not a failure. It is a necessity. You cannot heal what you cannot feel, and you cannot feel what you are still hiding from. You will resist. Of course you will. The unconscious does not give up its secrets easily. It protects them as if your life depended on it. Because once it did. But what saved you then may be what's killing you now. So the question is not, how do I become free? But what am I still running from? And deeper still, who did I become in order to survive what I couldn't face? That self, the one shaped by avoidance, by shame, by premature adaptation, is not your enemy. But it is not your truth either. It is the compromise you made with pain. To transform your thoughts, you must trace them backward, not forward. You must ask, what is this thought defending? What does this anxiety conceal? What memory does this numbness bury? You will find that your most persistent suffering is not random. It is structured. It repeats because it hasn't been recognized. It insists because it hasn't been named. And the unconscious, relentless, symbolic cunning will keep replaying the same internal script until you look beneath the stage. And when you do, you will not be uplifted. You will be destabilized. Because truth does not liberate by making us feel good. It liberates by destroying illusions. You don't want change. Not at first. You want relief. But relief is temporary. And often, it is another form of avoidance. Lasting change begins when you stop negotiating with your own avoidance. When you stop asking your defenses for permission to grow. Pain is not the enemy, nor is guilt, nor is fear. The enemy is disconnection, the refusal to feel. And so we arrive here not in resolution, but in recognition. The most radical act is not to transcend your wounds, but to see them, to stop pretending, to let the truth, not the ego, speak. Not everything can be healed, but everything can be faced. And in facing, we reclaim something more enduring than happiness. We reclaim our capacity to know ourselves even in our darkness, even in our contradiction, even in our shame. This is not transformation as fantasy. It is transformation as reckoning. The ego will resist. It must. But the unconscious waits, patient, inevitable. And if you listen not to your surface thoughts, but to the deeper symbols of your suffering, you will hear it. The truth beneath the noise, the self beneath the role, and the silence that was never empty, only repressed. Let it speak. The silence is not absence. It is presence in disguise. The weight of all that could not be said pressing outward from within. Every unspoken word is a fossilized cry. Every swallowed scream a monument to the terror of being too much, or not enough, or both at once. And so you became an actor in your own life, playing a role scripted not by your conscious will but by the forces you dared not name. You learned to smile where you wanted to rage, to comply where you longed to rebel, to numb where you needed to grieve. The cost of belonging was authenticity. The cost of survival was truth. And yet the body remembers. The unconscious remembers. It speaks in the language of symptom and dream, of déjà vu and inexplicable dread, of obsessions that mock your conscious goals and patterns that feel like fate. You think you want clarity, but clarity has a price. The collapse of every comforting lie you built to protect the child you were. You think you seek peace, but peace is intolerable when the war within remains unacknowledged. And so you oscillate, pulled between the hunger for freedom and the terror of what freedom demands. For to be truly free, you must risk seeing not only the ways you were wounded, but the ways you became complicit in your own wounding. The ways you clung to pain because it was familiar. The ways you rejected joy because it felt foreign. The ways you rehearsed your trauma until it became an identity. The unconscious is merciless because it is honest. It will not let you bypass your history. It will not let you erase the contradictions. It will not flatter you with illusions of innocence. Instead, it will drag you again and again into the same situations, the same conflicts, the same heartbreaks, until you recognize the common denominator, yourself. Not as you wish to be, but as you are, split, divided, at war with your own longing. To descend into the unconscious is to face what you sacrificed in order to be loved. It is to confront the grief of all you denied yourself so that others would not abandon you. It is to meet the shadow you cast over your own life, the parts of you deemed unworthy, dangerous, unacceptable, which now live in exile as projections onto those you hate, envy, or idolize. This is why insight alone is not enough. You can analyze, intellectualize, theorize, and still remain a stranger to yourself. Because the defenses do not live in thought. They live in flesh, in gesture, in breath. They are woven into the musculature of your being. To loosen them requires more than understanding. It requires surrender. But surrender is not submission. It is the courage to stop fighting what is already there. The courage to feel what you have spent a lifetime avoiding. The courage to let the repressed speak without censor, even if its voice terrifies you, especially then. What you find may not fit the narrative you've told yourself. You may discover hatred where you expected love, desire where you expected disgust, guilt where you expected pride. These are not flaws. They are evidence of your humanity. For the unconscious does not moralize. It does not care about your image of yourself. It cares only for truth, raw and unvarnished. And truth is not clean. It is messy, ambivalent, full of contradictions. You can love and hate the same person. You can long for connection and fear it with equal intensity. You can be victim and perpetrator, innocent and complicit, all at once. To know this is not to despair. It is to become whole. But wholeness is not comfort. Wholeness is the shattering of the false self, the crumbling of every mask you thought you could not live without. And in the rubble, you may glimpse something unfamiliar yet intimately yours, the face you had before the world told you who to be. This is not about integration, but about bringing repressed conflicts into conscious awareness. Not escape, but working through resistance. Not the pursuit of happiness, but the pursuit of insight, no matter how painful. And if you persist, if you dare to sit with the unbearable, you may discover that what is unbearable is not the pain itself, but the loneliness of carrying it unseen. To witness your own suffering without judgment is to return to yourself a little at a time. You are not broken. You are divided. And division can be healed, not by erasing one half in favor of the other, but by holding both in the same breath. This is the paradox of transformation. You change not by becoming someone else, but by becoming fully who you already are. The unconscious waits for no one, but it offers everything to those who listen. Beneath every defense is a need. Beneath every need, a wound. Beneath every wound, a story longing to be told. And once told, it no longer owns you. The ego will tell you this is dangerous, that to feel deeply is to lose control, that to face your darkness is to be consumed by it. But the greater danger lies in never turning inward, in mistaking numbness for peace, in mistaking repetition for fate. You were not born to be at war with yourself. You were born to remember, to reclaim, to return. And so you descend, not to destroy what you find, but to hold it in the light of your awareness until it no longer needs to hide. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a life no longer dictated by the ghosts of the past, a life no longer scripted by fear, a life that emerges raw and real from the depths you once fled. And when you emerge, you will not be the same. You will not be fixed. You will not be perfect, but you will be whole, and that is enough. The deeper you go, the more the ground beneath you seems to shift. What you called yourself begins to dissolve, and in its place, something older stirs a presence that has been waiting in silence, not patient, but persistent, like a tide pressing against the shore. This is not the self you show the world. This is the self you buried, fragment by fragment, each piece wrapped in shame, in fear, in the quiet agreements you made to survive. And now, in this inner descent, the burial ground begins to speak. You feel it first, as unease, as a faint sense that something is watching you from within. But it is not an alien presence. It is you, the child you once were, the impulses you disowned, the grief that never found a voice. They have not vanished. They have only gone underground, building pressure in the darkness, leaking out as anxiety, as compulsions, as the strange, inescapable patterns that bind you to the past. To face them is to risk everything your ego has constructed, its moral certainty, its self-image, its fragile sense of control. The ego fears the unconscious because it is not bound by reason. It is not orderly, it is raw, chaotic, alive. And yet, within that chaos lies the truth you have been circling all your life. You begin to realize that repression is not forgetting, it is remembering too much. The memory is too heavy, too charged, too dangerous to hold in awareness, so it is split off and stored in the body, in the nervous system, in the subtle flinches and chronic tensions that have become so familiar, you mistake them for who you are. This is why you freeze in moments that require action. This is why you lash out when tenderness is offered. This is why you chase validation and flee intimacy in the same breath. It is not madness. It is the logic of a psyche protecting itself from annihilation. But the protection has a cost. You live in a cage whose bars you can no longer see, and the most insidious part, you built those bars yourself, not out of weakness, but out of necessity. As a child, you learned quickly what parts of you were welcome and what parts provoked withdrawal, ridicule, rage. You learned to amputate what was too much for others to hold: your anger, your desire, your sadness, your wildness. Piece by piece, you exiled yourself from yourself. And now you wonder why life feels hollow, why relationships leave you aching, why success tastes like ash. It is because you are haunted by the unlived life within you, the parts of you that never stopped longing to be seen, to be felt, to be known. You have two choices: continue repressing, and the unconscious will keep finding ways to pierce the surface through symptoms, through accidents, through the endless repetition of suffering that makes you ask, why does this keep happening to me? Or turn toward the pain and let it speak at last. This turning is not an act of willpower. It is an act of surrender. You do not conquer the unconscious. You let it reveal itself. You let the child weep. You let the anger burn through you without acting it out or pushing it away. You let the memories return, not as facts, but as felt truths. The terror in your chest, the longing in your gut, the helplessness in your hands. You begin to understand that you are not simply an individual. You are a field of forces, shaped by generations of silence, by cultural prohibitions, by ancestral grief passed down in wordless gestures and unspoken rules. What you repress is not only personal, it is collective. And to break the cycle is to bear what others could not. This work is not glamorous. It is not clean. You will rage. You will despair. You will want to go back to sleep, to retreat into the familiar numbness of distraction and denial. But something in you knows the cost of sleeping. Something in you refuses to betray itself again. And so you stay. You stay with the ache that has no name. You stay with the guilt that whispers you were always too much. You stay with the fear that if you are truly seen, you will be abandoned. You stay until you realize the abandonment has already happened not by others, but by yourself. This is the moment of reckoning. The moment you see that your suffering is not punishment, it is the signal that a part of you is ready to return. But return is not restoration. You do not go back to who you were before the wound. There is no before. There is only the possibility of becoming someone who can hold the wound without being defined by it. The ego resists this because it prefers perfection to wholeness. It wants to eradicate the darkness, not integrate it. But the darkness is not your enemy. It is the place where life began. To deny it is to deny yourself. So you let it in. The rage, the grief, the unbearable love you feel for those who could not love you back. You let it flood you, and in that flood the false self begins to dissolve. You are not becoming someone new. You are unearthing the one who was buried. And in this unearthing, there is a quiet, almost imperceptible shift. The defenses that once seemed necessary begin to soften. The compulsions lose their grip. The old patterns no longer feel inevitable. It is not that you are healed. It is that you are present. Present to the complexity of being alive. Present to the terror and the beauty. Present to yourself at last. And this presence is the seed of transformation. Not transformation as escape. Transformation as the painstaking process of bringing unconscious material into consciousness, however disruptive it may be. The unconscious does not wait. It constantly acts upon you through symptoms and repetitions, compelling you to uncover its hidden truths. And yet as you stay, as you allow the tide of what was banished to rise higher within you, you begin to feel the weight of everything you swore you would never touch. The memories no longer arrive as images alone. They come as sensations, as a tightening in the chest, as a sudden heat in the throat, as a deep aching hollow in the stomach. They arrive as fragments of voices, echoes of accusations and cries, and the deafening silence that followed. And in this silence you hear it, the unspoken pact you made with yourself long ago. I will not feel this. I will not let it destroy me. I will bury it so deep that even I will not remember. But the unconscious remembers. It remembers not because it is cruel, but because it is faithful to the truth. It does not care for the stories you've wrapped around your pain, the justifications you've rehearsed for why you are the way you are. It cares only to keep the split parts of you alive, waiting for the day you are strong enough to bear their reunion. And here you are, standing on the threshold. You thought the hardest part would be uncovering the wound, but it is not. The hardest part is seeing how much of your identity was built to protect it. The hardest part is realizing that the person you thought you were, the careful, controlled, accomplished mask you present to the world, was born from this very fracture. Can you bear to see how your ambition was fueled by a terror of being nothing? Can you admit how your kindness was sometimes a strategy to avoid rejection? Can you face the moments when your self-sacrifice was less about love and more about fear? The ego revolts here. It insists, I am good. I am in control. I know myself. But the ego is a brilliant liar. It learned to tell these lies so convincingly because they were once necessary for survival. As a child, you could not afford to see the full weight of your pain. It would have broken you. So you broke it into pieces instead, hiding them in the cracks of your psyche, cloaking them in amnesia. But now you are no longer a child, and the unconscious does not tolerate amnesia forever. You begin to understand that repression is not passive. It is active work. It is the body holding tension day after day, the mind erecting barriers of distraction and rationalization, the spirit contorting itself to avoid the abyss. It is exhausting. And beneath that exhaustion lies rage. Rage at what you endured. Rage at how you betrayed yourself to endure it. Rage at how much life you lost in the process. This rage is sacred. It is not here to destroy you. It is here to awaken you. For a moment, the flood of feeling threatens to overwhelm. You feel the impulse to turn away, to run back into the numbness, the scrolling, the overthinking, the carefully constructed routines that keep you from touching the rawness of existence. But something stronger keeps you here. Some quiet knowing that the only way out is through. And so you stay. You let the grief pour through you, wave after wave, until you begin to see that grief itself is not the enemy. Grief is proof of love, proof that you once reached for life with an open hand, proof that part of you still longs to live. As the layers peel back, you come to the one thing you have spent your entire life avoiding, the truth that you are both innocent and responsible. Innocent for what was done to you, responsible for how you have kept yourself imprisoned long after the threat was gone. This is the point of no return. You see how blame, whether toward others or yourself, has been a defense against the unbearable truth that life is unfair, that suffering is indiscriminate, that there is no one to come and rescue you but yourself. And yet, strangely, there is relief here. To drop the fantasy of rescue is to reclaim the parts of you that have been waiting for your own recognition. You begin to see that wholeness was never about becoming perfect or unblemished. It was about becoming large enough to hold all of you. The rage and the tenderness, the shame and the longing, the terror and the love. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were simply asked too early to carry what was not yours to carry. And now, for the first time, you can put it down. This is not a happy ending. There are no happy endings in the psyche, only deeper layers of becoming. But there is a shift, a loosening of the armor, a softening of the gaze you turn inward. The unconscious has not been conquered. It never will be. But it no longer needs to drag you down into the same cycles, the same repetitions. It no longer needs to scream to be heard. You have heard it. And in that hearing, something opens. The possibility of a life that is not an endless reaction to the past, but a living, breathing encounter with the present. Not a life without pain, but a life where pain no longer has to hide. Not a life without fear, but a life where fear no longer has to rule. A life, at last, in which you recognize how unconscious forces have shaped you and begin the long work of negotiating with them consciously. And now, there is no further to go. The descent is complete. You have come to the place beneath all places, the point where words begin to dissolve and only sensation remains raw, trembling, alive. Here, there are no more stories to cling to, no more justifications or denials, only the truth, stark and unadorned. You are a being who has suffered, who has loved, who has longed, and who has feared that longing more than death itself. You see, at last, the primal fracture, the moment you turned away from yourself to survive. It was not weakness, it was brilliance. The psyche is cunning in its will to live, but the cost was exile. You became a stranger to your own depths, and yet even in exile, the lost parts of you waited. They waited in the shadows, in the dreams, in the ache behind your ribs. They waited in the compulsions you cursed and the desires you could not name. They waited in silence, patient, relentless. Now you see them clearly, The child who cried out and was not heard. The rage that burned and was called shameful. The desire that reached and was struck down. You see them all, and for the first time, you do not turn away. You let them speak. The grief comes first, heavy, tidal, ancient. It rolls through you, and you let it. You do not resist. You do not soothe. You do not demand that it make sense. You simply feel. Then comes the rage, fierce and sharp. You let it burn through you, knowing it is not here to destroy, but to clear the ground for something new. And beneath the rage, beneath even the grief, you find something softer, a tenderness so fragile it feels almost unbearable. This is the life force you buried to survive. The raw, unguarded capacity to feel, to love, to exist. You thought you had lost it. You had not. It had only gone underground, waiting for you to be ready. And now, perhaps for the first time, you are. There is no grand revelation, no blinding light, only a quiet shift, a softening, as though the air itself has changed. The ego does not collapse in a dramatic shattering. It loosens, like a fist unclenching. You begin to understand. You will never be free of pain, or fear, or contradiction. You are human. To be human is to live with intention, to carry wounds that never fully close. But you are no longer at war with yourself. You are no longer running. You are no longer hiding. This is not healing as you imagined it. It is not a blissful reunion with a lost self, but the difficult process of uncovering and working through repressed memories that continue to shape your life unconsciously. The self that feels, the self that longs, the self that dares to exist in all its terrible, beautiful complexity. You are not whole, nor do you need to be. What matters is that the repressed conflicts have surfaced into awareness, allowing the psychic tension to be worked through and no longer unconsciously repeated. And this wholeness, quiet and unassuming, is the foundation for everything that follows. You step back from the depths, not to escape them, but to carry their truth into the light. And as you rise, you know, the unconscious will never stop speaking. It will whisper in dreams. It will surface in moments of stillness. It will remind you, again and again, of the parts of you still waiting to be seen. But now you will not fear it. You will listen. You will listen, because to listen is to live. And in living, you will begin, at last, to transform.